I'm Jeffrey Sachs. I'm the Director of Research here at the Agnon House. Welcome to those of you that are with us tonight. We know that there's a lot going on in Jerusalem tonight, so we thank you for choosing to be with us. But here during the book festival, every night there's something literary going on in every street corner. It's one of the beautiful things about living in Jerusalem. Welcome to the Agnon House. We hope you have a chance to look around, and certainly please sign up at the desk for our newsletter and like us on Facebook and follow us for all of our activities. For the English speakers, of whom you are counted, we'll be starting next Wednesday, exactly a week from tonight at 7 p.m. We're starting a new 3-week series of talks in English on Agnon, the Jerusalem of Agnon. Not Jerusalem of gold, but Jerusalem of Agnon. Agnon's stories of Jerusalem for 3 weeks, for the 3 weeks leading up to Tisha B'Av, and we'll be principally looking at stories in this collection in English, 2 scholars who were in our town, and other stories, which is available here at the desk or in local bookstores, or just come along to listen to the talks. You won't be graded on the homework whether you've done the reading or not. Before I introduce our very special guest, our friend Vasyl Makhno, I am very pleased to turn the microphone over to my good friend Natalia Buchach of the Ukrainian-Jewish Experience, which has been such a good friend to what we do here at the Beit Agnon, and has brought together the Agnon House of Buchach, the actual Agnon House of Buchach, with the actual Agnon House of Jerusalem, and we're always so happy to see you and continue to work together at the important work that we do.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. Ukrainian-Jewish Encounter was founded in 2008 with the goal of having a dialogue between Ukrainians and Jews. And since this period of time, we've supported conferences, book fairs, festivals, have had academic conferences, have worked on a shared historical narrative that looks at the Ukrainian and Jewish experience on the territory of Ukraine. Certainly the war, Russia's, I will say, criminal war against Ukraine, has really upended everyone's work. However, we're very glad that we were able this year to bring Vasyl Makhno to Israel. We had planned to do this at the beginning of 2022. And so Vasyl, he is a Ukrainian poet, essayist, author, one of the great literary voices in Ukraine. He is winner of Encounter, the Ukrainian-Jewish Literary Prize, which we founded in 2019 for his book, Eternal Calendar, Vichny Kalendar. He will, a copy of the book is here. You can read excerpts of that work in English and in Hebrew on our website at ukrainianjewishencounter.org. Also, we are presenting, I have given you a copy of his bilingual work, which are Ukrainian poems that have been translated into Hebrew. Although this book was published a while ago, this is the first time that we are presenting this book in Israel for a Hebrew and Ukrainian language audience. And so I think tonight's discussion should be very, very interesting. Jeffrey and I have now had a very long relationship, and many discussions over the phone, in person, and via Zoom. So I will turn the floor over to you, and once again, thank you for coming this evening to this beautiful home. My father was born in Buchach, and I've had the opportunity to be there many times. So, without any further delay, Jeffrey, please.
Thank you so much. Since our friend Natalia has already introduced you, Vasyl, I can skip that, aside from saying that you really are a very, very important and original voice in Ukrainian literature. Although you have been living now for almost more than 20 years in New York, which creates an interesting parallel to our own great author Agnon, of what it means to be a writer in exile, writing about a world from which you are at home in, but at remove. And I always say about Agnon who left Buchach when he was 20, and except for one very short visit, essentially never returned. But you can take the boy out of Buchach, but you can't take the Buchach out of the boy or out of the author, and I know that you feel the same for that very same region, what we once called Galicia, which today is now, of course, Western Ukraine. And I want to come back to actually what is happening in Ukraine, the atrocities that are happening now in Ukraine, and talk about what it means to be a writer creating literature for that world and that culture at this particular time. But we're going to save that for a little bit later in our conversation. I want to first focus on your work as a poet, as a prose author. You have these two really interesting novels, which unfortunately I am unable to read in the original. The first is Eternal Calendar, and the other is a work in progress, nearly finished, coming out soon, called the Angel and the Donkey. Now, for those of us here, synagogue goers and Torah readers, we know that this week, the day after tomorrow, we'll go to synagogue and we'll read the Torah portion of Parashat Balak, the story of the angel and the donkey, which serves as a basis for your work. And your stories are replete with descriptions of events in Jewish history, Shabtai Tzvi, Chassidut. In your new book, there's a character named Shmuel Yosef Chachkis. He's the son of Shalom Mordechai Chachkis. These are figures that we know. Now, they're fictional figures in your hand on your pages, but this is our Agnon, of course. Someone reading your works, before we even describe what they are, will obviously remark that this is a very, very Jewish author. but in fact, just so there should be no mistake, you are not in fact Jewish. How do you come to write works of such Jewish urgency?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Natalia. I'm honored to be here. It's the beautiful place, and Beit Agnon is my second visit to this place, because my first visit to Israel, and especially to Agnon House, was 9 years ago. Yes, I'm Ukrainian in both sides, completely. When I was 5 years old, my parents divorced, and my childhood was in my grandparents in the village. It's a village 30 kilometers behind Chortkiv. And my grandpa was born in 1916 and grandma 1923, and that generation, his generation, they lived during World War II. And I often listen about villagers, and my grandma and grandpa told about Jews. And my question was, where Jews right now? Okay, during the war, it's a very complicated time, and German killed many of the Jewish people. The first time I met with Jewish only in my image, right? Like
In your imagination.
Imagination. It's like symbolic meeting, right? The next one, when I was student of university in the first year, I take bus through Buchach, and probably in the center was a renovated for that streets, and bus right the tour. And when we ride on the slope, I see many stones. It was Jewish kirkut, but
I'm saying it was a Jewish
kirkut. It's a cemetery.
cemetery.
Cemetery. Is Kirkuk no? No Kirkuk?
I'm not sure what that word is.
Okay. And it is the first time meeting, I see, okay, what is that? And when I start writing, I thinking, okay, I was born in Galicia. It's a multicultural place and land. And in one essay, I wrote about that place, something. I talked about Galicia, mentioning that Austrian and Poles lived in their own states. Jews lived in their own books, and we Ukrainians lived in our own land. It's some kind of metaphor, right? But in that metaphor, it makes sense for me. When I started wrote that the eternal calendar, that's some kind of epic novel, because I described 4 centuries, from 17th centuries to present time. And if I asked myself, okay, that land multicultural, the many ethnics live in that in Galicia, I must describe every ethnicity, every minority, and the relationship between each other. And I started make some kind of search. I buy books, I read articles, I have consultation with many scholars, especially for Jewish question with Yohanan Petrovsky-Stern, who
Northwestern
University,
a scholar of Eastern European Jews.
Yes, and that's why that for me, in contemporary Ukrainian literature and contemporary time in Ukraine, it's very important to show our readers about multicultural situation in the Galicia and whole Ukraine, of course. Frankly speaking, for me, that Galicia is very rich material for writers, and I remember about Agnon, about another Jewish or Ukrainian writers who describe this situation. Ivan Franko or Timothy Burdulak in Ukrainian side. Today in Ukraine is a terrible time. Yes, we have war, and if we come back to see history and developing history through 20th century or early, we take some kind of open viewing on our nation, our culture, and our land, and what happened today and what will be in future.
In her review of, again, sadly I'm unable to read the book, although it is coming out soon in English,
Yeah.
Eternal Calendar.
Yeah.
In her review of the novel, Oksana Rosenblum writes that the Jews, as depicted in the novel, and again, the false messiah, Shabtai Tzvi, 17th century figure, which belief in that false messiah and the eventual catastrophe of the letdown had colossal impact on Eastern European Jewish life. And you use this as a metaphor for all types of disappointment and disaster that cutting across all of the ethnicities of the place. So she writes that in your book, Jews should not have trusted messianic ideas of Shabtai Tzvi. The Jews of Galicia should not have trusted, later, they should not have trusted the Germans based on a feudal hope that they would behave like a normal nation steeped in the culture of Goethe. Ukrainians knew what to expect of the Soviet invasion, not the current Russian invasion, the Soviet invasion then, and yet nobody imagined it would be as horrible as it all turned out to be. Everyone naively trusts in what's coming. They're terribly disappointed. They suffer trauma and defeat and catastrophe and collapse and invasion and incursion. And what are you trying to say about these tides of Jewish history from the 17th century through the 20th century, and then I guess with implications for what's going on today? What are you trying to say about this lesson of history through this novel?
Very interesting question, because in this novel,
because again, in other words, they're all you use the historical episode of Shabtai Tzvi as a kind of metaphor for all false hopes, all hopes that are dashed up against reality with catastrophic results. In other words, Sabbatianism becomes a metaphor for everything, for the Soviet Union, for all false hopes, for all types of false messiah.
Yes, because in that text, in the novel, I describe that every 30 years in Galicia, war is coming in Galicia. And all ethnicities has ruins life. If we are going to false messiah or false ideas or false images about life, about future, yes, that Shabtai Tzvi is the kind of. And I describe in the first chapters, it's a time of the 70th centuries, and most about Polish Ottoman Polish Ottomans war. In the second chapters, it's about World War I. In the third chapter, about some kind World War II and after that. Yes, in my mind and in my point of view, on that history about what happened in this land, and it's a metaphorical because I want to combine the local history and universal history. And I deeply understand that local history and universal history linked. What happened in the Chortki in Buchach, some kind of during the war or during the peace period of life, that explosion to world history, because everything has a threads each other, and my idea in that or my message on this novel, that calendar, something calendar, eternal calendar or historical calendar, often return in the new level. But and right now in this book I talk about war, but we live in currently time where war in Ukraine is a present.
We're gonna read an excerpt in English from the book. But before we do that, just by way of honoring the Ukrainian language, I want you to read the opening passage in Ukrainian.
Okay.
I don't think any of us will understand you, but I want to hear the music of the language. It's always important to hear the rhythm and the music of the language in order to understand something.
Thank you.
It's a point that when teaching Agnon in English to people that are unable to experience him in the original, I often will do that the same. You have to hear the author in his original language, even if you don't understand it, even if you're reading it in translation.
Okay. It's except from first part of and first chapter. It's a title Messiah from Smyrna. Розпочинається наша історія з того, що восени 5426 року від створення світу, і 1666 року від Різдва Христового, і 1115 року за вірменським літочисленням, і 1076 року мусульманського календаря Гіджри з порту міста Ізмір відплила галера Баштарда. Подія, на котру можна було б не звернути уваги, якби цією галерою плив до Стамбула хтось інший, а не Сабатай Цві, ізмірський мешканець, який оголосив світові про своє месіанство. Надходили роки, у які тривожно вчитувалися юдейські книжники та християнські богослови, щоб зрозуміти, що чекає цей світ. А очікували вони приходу Месії та кінця світу.
I understood Shabtai Tzvi. But it is a way of, also it's important for us to, in addition to honoring the language, to recognizing that most of the people in the world today that...
I would like to...
Yes, but most of the people in the world today who could have understood that, unfortunately, are in a situation where they probably don't have the luxury to sit and enjoy fine literature at the moment. So it's important, doubly important, that we should read it. But here's an excerpt in English.
In English, translated by Eli Kinsella. The Messiah from Smyrna. Our story begins in the autumn of the 5,426 years since the creation of the world. The year of our Lord 1666, the year 1115 according to the Armenians, and 1076 in the Islamic calendar of the Hijri era, when a galley bastarda sailed from the port city of Smyrna. It was an event that could be easily had been overlooked if someone other than Sabbatai Tzvi, resident of Smyrna, who had proclaimed his messiahship to the world, he sailed on this galley to Istanbul. The years had come that the Jewish scribes and Christian theologians were peering into the order to understand what awaited this world. They were waiting for the coming of the Messiah and the end times. Hence, the quarrels in the synagogues couldn't be quelled for the scribes following along the every letter of the Torah and licking their fingers unfurled the scroll of parchment to grasp of the words, first in their eyes and only then with their minds. Christian theologians such as Ioanniki Galatovsky were convinced that only Christians upheld the laws of Moses and would therefore be saved. Astronomers peered into the starry sky looking in divine signs so they could be first to notice anything that might hint at some news of the end of world. It was known that before and that time there would become false messiah, wars, hunger, disease, and floods, and the great mayhem would reign over the people. In London, for example, the plague raged brought to Dutch merchants. Chief Secretary of the Admiralty Samuel Pepys writes in his diary that after he Crown's ordered to put down all dogs and cats, that the range of the plague expands. All summer the city's rats spread the fatal disease while the inhabitants of London carried corpses from their homes and piled them up in the streets, because there were no carts to take them to the cemeteries. It was only at the start of September that the royal baker forgot to extinguish the oven. He was baking bread for the court, and half of the city burned down. Along with the building, the carriers of the disease, and also burned, and everyone who evacuated London returned. There were some other events around the world that everyone has forgotten, so we cannot recall them there. But that Sabbatai Tzvi, who divided the world into 26 parts, offering them to his followers, was not in the least concerned the empires and kingdoms had long possessed what they was easily giving away. The Ottoman and Roman empires, Spain and Portugal, the Tsardom of Moscow and Queen dynasty in China, Patriarch Nikon's abdication, and Isaac Newton's discovery of gravity, the gunboat war between the English and the Kingdom of Denmark, and the first Armenian Bible published in Amsterdam. Everything that is connected by the invisible thread of history lived them in anticipation of the end times, because the end times are always with us.
Elisa, you had wanted to ask a question a moment ago.
I have a question. Since for a large period of time, the language of literature and so forth in the Ukraine was Russian, was there ever a decision between writing in Ukrainian and writing in Russian?
Okay, that same question.
In case everyone didn't hear, the question was the tension between Russian as one's official language and Ukrainian, and the artistic decision which language to write in.
You know that Ukrainian literature and Ukrainian language has 1,000 years. We always was divided between Eastern world and Western world. From 18th or 17th century, Ukraine was divided between Russian Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire. In the Russian Empire was a struggle against Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian intellectuals, the Ukrainian language. In the western side, the Austro-Hungarian Empire,
where Galicia was.
Yes, Galicia was, support Ukrainians for kept language, culture, etc. During Soviet period, we have Ukrainian literature, we have Ukrainian-speaking people, we have Ukrainian schools and high schools and universities. Yes, that large of population, Ukrainian population, not only Russians and especially in Ukrainians, speaking in Russian.
Growing up, Russian was your school language?
No, because
your home was Ukrainian,
yes,
your school was Ukrainian?
Yes, because I was born that my parents was a teacher in the high school, right? And we, all generation of my family spoke in Ukrainian, and our identification Ukrainian and our culture Ukrainian. Yes, one time for 5 years I lived in the Kryvyi Rih. Kryvyi Rih, it's an industrial center of Ukraine, where I was born, for example, a Zelensky president. Yeah, in that city, most speaking Russian. Yes, of course. But why? Because during Holodomor, 1932-33, many Ukrainian peasants was killed, like, yes. It was a genocide against Ukrainian nation. After World War II, many people from whole Soviet Union going to Kryvyi Rih because it was an industrial center at a good salary, etc., etc. Of course, in this city, most people speaking Russian. For example, my parents is teaching. I live in building. In our backyard, Russian school. That my parents make decision. Guy, you will be studied in Ukrainian school, and every day I take trolley bus. I took the trolley bus and ride in 40 minutes to Ukrainian school. It's some kind of identity and decision and link it to our native culture.
So the parallels to the Jewish experience of children growing up amidst a culture that was not fully theirs, but yet the sacrifice of their parents and the dedication to go to Hebrew school and to go to Jewish day school and to not be removed from their authentic culture. Their parallels just speak for themselves.
Although in a way it's reversed, right?
Because they were at home, right.
They were Ukrainians at home, but the dominant culture was a Russian culture.
Yes, and that's situation also from Russian propaganda, because Russian propaganda told that in Ukraine many people speak in Russian, like Russian culture, and etc., etc. It's not true.
Mr. Putin made it clear that he was doing everyone a favor by bringing Russia back to Ukraine.
Absolutely. And of course we have problem with that. But I think in that after war, where we will be victory, that situation in Ukraine, inside Ukraine, with the culture, with the language and school, etc., will be completely changed. Because many Ukrainians who speak Russian right now forgot Russian and began to speak Ukrainian.
Sure.
It's a movement for, I think, that national mentality change.
Your books have been translated.
Your books have been translated to Russian.
Yes,
And
some of books.
How have they been received in Russia?
I don't know. That my old
Presumably
book,
they've been removed
my,
from the
my
shelves
old
at the
book
moment.
and my some kind of publication in a major of Russian literary magazines. All publication was before war.
Right.
Before war.
Well, I had intended actually, since we kind of digressed into the topic, let's face the elephant in the room. It's a very, very difficult moment now for Ukraine as a nation, for the Ukrainian people, wherever they are in the country, in the Ukrainian diaspora. And as is always the case when these things happen, and of course we Jewish people know this probably better than most, it becomes both a difficult moment, but an opportunistic moment for culture, for Ukrainian culture. But here you are, you're one of the most important articulate voices in Ukrainian letters today, although you live for over 2 decades abroad. How do you feel the events of the war impacting on your writing, on your poetry, on what you're thinking about, on your future projects? How is this shaping your work?
In February 24, when I read that Russian brutally attacked Ukraine, I wrote my first poem about war, titled War.
Oh yes, this was published in the
Los Angeles, yes,
books, right?
that
Yes.
my translators immediately translated into English, and in short time, Los Angeles Review of Books published that poem. And during probably 2 months, I wrote 15 or 16 poems about war. And this poem was translated on the huge languages. In the Poland, do you know Krzysztof Czerzalski, who founded Pogranicze, Foundation for Pogranicze? It's some kind of borderlands. In the same,
yes,
you know that guy, yes. And Krzysztof made decision to start published books of Ukrainian poets about war. And in the current time, probably 20 books in both languages, like that bilingual, Ukrainian and Polish, published in that publishing house Pogranicze. I wrote a couple essays about war. I was invited to BBC Radio in London and Turkish TV, Georgian TV, etc., and I spoke about war and my impression about the war, like a writer and like Ukrainian, right? I think in that that poetry, it's immediately reacted on this event, right? The war, but the prose, for prose, need that time, you know. And right now in Ukrainian publishing house printed that some books, documentary book or some diary about or anthology of poems or short stories about war, but that novels and deeply understanding what happened, I think, will be in future.
Well, so that's an interesting observation, because you're both a prose writer, you're a novelist of multi-hundred-page novels, and also poet, and you have different tools in your toolkit to respond as an artist. You know, when confronted with this this traumatic event, the first tool that you reach for is poetry.
Yeah.
And so, but why is poetry a better vehicle for immediate response? Or alternatively, why does prose take more time to ferment before it's ready?
Yes, because that for write poetry I need approximately 15-20 minutes. But that prose, it's a hard job, and the prose has a plot, has a characters, has a many backgrounds, and yes, and writer must be thinking about that. I think that poetry in Ukraine, it's a traditional situation. The poetry dominated, and in the many of Slavic literatures, poetry dominated. It's you know, it's some kind of tradition.
Well, be it prose or be it poetry, what is the role of an artist or an author? What is the task before you in responding to what's happening to your nation and your people?
You know, I deeply understanding that even poem doesn't stop any rockets and bombs and tanks.
If only it would.
But the human has soul, and humans needs understanding, because the words has a power. If you read Bible or Torah or Shmuel Agnon's, that the combination of the sentence has a power under that reader, right? And that power, I think that needs for dramatic times for our country and our nation. And many poets of Ukrainian poets right now open, I think that second front. It's a cultural front. Yeah, cultural front. Yeah.
Yeah.
Possible to ask
Sure.
questions? So I'm curious about your relationship to Russian literature and Russian opponents to Putin's regime, if there are contacts like that. Are there Russian influences on Ukrainian culture and literature and vice versa?
The question is about Russian influences on Ukrainian culture.
Yeah. Yes, Russian literature was influenced in Ukrainian literature. We have, for example, in Kyiv was born Mikhail Bulgakov. Osip Mandelstam, a couple years of his life lives in Kyiv, right? But after revolution, when Bolshevik took power, and Ukrainian communists, especially writers like Khvelyovey, he told that for Ukrainian language, we need reject Moscow. We need reject Moscow. Why? Because that influence has a positive and negative moments for Ukrainian literature. During 20th centuries, many of Ukrainian authors would be happen to link and open Western culture and Western literature. But that dominated of Russian in the world, because many of people around the world now knows only about Russian culture, only about Russian authors, only about Russian opera, music, etc. But somebody hear something about Ukrainian culture? No. About Ukrainian opera, or about Ukrainian composers? About Ukrainian theater? No, right? Why? That question, why is it important for my generation? We not rejected or banned Russian literature, Russian culture, but we try to search another way for our culture, another way for our literature. And that today, that war showed to us, yes, it's a very different time, and finally we must say stop. We Ukrainians, we have whole culture, we have everything, and we must be going to world stage.
I want to, we have only a little bit of time left. I want to turn our attention to the new book, to The Angel and the Donkey. Before we do, explain to us what is this imagery of the angel and the donkey, which again, as I mentioned, is from this week's Torah portion.
Okay, that novel has a very complicated structure, because that story about Ukrainian writer who lives in United States, and he met on the Slavistic conference in New Orleans, professor of Hebrew literature from Jerusalem, from this university. Her name Esther Krautkopf.
Cabbage head.
Oh, yeah. And between each other, that romantic relation, that Esther, okay, and that guy going to Ukraine because his father died and he must sell his family apartment. And when we stay in Ukraine, Esther sent to him messages. Where are you guys? I'm in Ukraine. Okay, you could be help me? What happened? Please go into Buchach. I start working on the book about Agnon. Please go into Buchach and search some kinds of materials, maybe what had, you know. And that main hero, main character came to Buchach, and he looked in library, the place of ruin of the synagogue, the place that and he understand that no materials, nothing survives, and etc. etc. It's a very long story. And why Angel and that guy writer also write the main book of masterpiece of book of his literary career. The title, The Angel and Donkey, because he stayed in Old City, and one time on in his mind he thinking, okay, I must write about biblical time. That angel is about the Christianity story. It's a very complicated structure and but I'm going to finish, work in progress. But I hope and I believe that book will be published in 2024.
So the excerpt that we have in English is the opening of the novel?
No.
So,
That's 1/3 part of the novel will be about contemporary time, and the second dedicated to Agnon.
So we have an excerpt of that section available in English. It's on the website in English and in Hebrew. And it begins with, that section begins with a kind of foundational myth of Buchach. Now, for readers of Agnon, we already have the Agnonian version of the foundation of Buchach. But since Agnon sees everything through the prism of the Jewish experience, Buchach begins when the first Jews arrive. He is almost oblivious to the fact that there may have been another nation that had lived there. And his story, which is told in at least 2 different places in Agnon's writing, perhaps most forcefully in his long collection of stories about Buchach called Ir Umloa, a city in its fullness, is a distinctly Judaized version of this. It's a story of actually, of course, Buchach is a very Zionistic town, because when the Jews were arriving there in the Middle Ages, they were actually a group of Jews that were just passing through on their way to Aliyah. They weren't even sure where the land of Israel was, but since they prayed to the east, they figured it was in the east, they head out on a journey, and then, you know, you get to Buchach, and in the winter, it snows a lot, and they get stuck there, and they've been there ever since, he writes. But
for addition to my experience, when I read Agnon's novels about Buchach, and I thinking, okay, where is the Ukrainians in Buchach? Where is the Poles in Buchach? Where is the Austrian Buchach? Only Jewish. Okay,
it's a very insular portrait of the world.
Yes.
So let me, if you'll allow me, I'll read just one excerpt from here.
Yeah.
It's the introduction to Buchach, and then we're introduced to a character called Yehuda Farb, who is an important townsman of Buchach. has a son-in-law, Shalom Mordechai, who goes to the family fur trade, who has a grandson, Shmuel Yosef, who becomes the great Hebrew author. The story begins like this. The town was as tiny as a bird's egg. But what kind of bird could have laid it? A magpie, a hen, or even perhaps a firebird. In any case, it rolled down to the ravines along the Stripa River, where it cracked open. And when it did, people with cattle and fowl walked about. Birds scattered about. Beasts and serpents crawled forth. Wheat and oats were sown, and trees and bushes bloomed. Thus the town took root along the Stripa. Later, it matured, first stretching out along the river. For a while, the high hills slowed its growth. Later, the trees appeared organically, first parallel to the river, and then branching through the valleys and ravines, resembling a peeled-off eggshell from above. On some day of some year that no one quite remembers, Jews arrived in the town. They stopped at the river, bought a plot, and set to building. The screech of their carts carrying sandstone for the synagogue, mikveh, and homes pierced the town's air for 50 years. Then it finally came to a halt, with only their Beis Olam on a hill outside the city growing. They brought with them scrolls and velvet embossed with square script and carried them into the first synagogue, which they would later call Old Synagogue. They had booths in the markets, open shops, and every Saturday, quiet descended over the quarter, impressive for its age. The descendants of ones who spilled from the bird's egg and first settled those steep slopes from the Stripa passed through the stillness more than once without understanding why the city was so quiet. Perhaps it was this calm that filled the universe when the Creator first decided to make the world, in which a place was eventually found for a town called Buchach. And then you introduce the Agnon family. Now, what is Agnon doing? How did he find his way into your novel? Which is also my way of asking about your relationship with Agnon, the influence of Agnon on your writing, and
that story began in early 1990s when I first met Agnon's daughter Emuna in Ternopil. She came with her husband, an Argentinian television company. That television create movie, about European places of Agnon, and I strongly remember that Emuna write in my notice her Jerusalem address. He write Emuna and Chaim Yaron, 19 Washington Street, Jerusalem, Israel. And she told me, maybe you can visit to Jerusalem. I think, okay, I have approximately 30 years. I think, okay, that's where is Jerusalem, where is Ternopil? Okay.
You might as well soon get to the other side of the moon.
Oh, absolutely right. And we're talking about her father, very shortly, because and I visited Israel and Jerusalem 8 years ago. I asked my friends, where is Emuna Yaron, the daughter? And someone told me, unfortunately,
she had just passed away.
Yeah, they passed away. Yeah.
I should
say that Emuna Agnon Yaron, Agnon's daughter,
yeah,
who spent her life, grew up in this house, was his literary executor. She published more of his writing in book form after he died than he did in his own lifetime. Her contribution, her involvement with his writing is cannot be understated.
That in this future, in my novel, I want to describe some kind situation between Judaism and Christianity. Some kinds of life of someone writer, yes, especially that main character, and Agnon's life. And I also linked that text to Galicia and linked the text to small city of Buchach, because that action in this novel will be in Buchach, Ternopil, Bad Homburg, and
city in Germany.
Yes,
Agnon
yes,
in
yes,
the
and
20s.
Jerusalem, and also
all
in
the
New York.
stations of Agnon's
Yes,
life
yes,
intersecting with your own
yes,
life.
yes.
How interesting.
But I don't write Agnon's literary biography.
Right.
It's a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a many details. I thinking, okay, I don't know what exactly what happened in his life, right? But I make construction of characters because that writing or novels must be interesting to readers, and I want to show the readers that interesting person, not only positive or negative. It's like black and white, like the slope and down.
Right. Those that visit Buchach, as I have, as Kitty, you were with us in Buchach, weren't you? Oh, and Karen also traveled with us in, I guess that was 2018. We were together in Buchach. I've had plans at least twice to go back, once canceled because of COVID and once canceled now because of war, and I hope I'll get there again soon. But when you go to Buchach, it's this charming little city, and you can tour around, as you can see in this video exhibit that we have here. If you kind of close one eye and ignore people carrying a cell phone and modern automobiles, you can imagine that it's not much different than it was when Agnon was writing about it, stories that are set at the beginning of the 20th century. And they're very proud. There are no Jews today living in Buchach, but they are very proud of the local boy who did well, the great author that sprung from amongst them. And of course, there's the Agnon Literary Center, which is a project supported by the work of the UJE, and our good friend Mariana, under great struggle now is keeping things going. But in normal times, it's an important cultural center in the city, promoting literature and culture and poetry and all types of things in memory of Agnon and in Agnon's spirit. So what's interesting, of course, is that in Agnon's writings, the most important character, the greatest literary character, the greatest literary creation is the narrator himself, is this character who we, the readers, immediately fall into the trap that this is autobiographical, that the author's done nothing more than project himself into the stories, although of course that's a trap that the author sets for his readers. So for you to create a fictional literary character named Shmuel Yosef Agnon is the most Agnonian turn of all, and I'm sure no one would be more delighted than he to discover himself in a Ukrainian novel, written in the diaspora.
Yes,
because he understood what it meant to do that. So I think that's an excellent way to kind of focus our mind around, which we're all looking forward. Well, the world is looking forward to be published in any language, and then hopefully soon it'll be available to us in Hebrew, in English, and other things. We have time for a question or two, and then we really must wrap it up. Yes.
I couldn't help thinking. Was it last year? We heard a talk here in Jerusalem, not in this place, but by Olga Togarchuk. And she is also, and I bought her book. I'm getting through it rather slowly, but where she also focuses on Shabtai, not Shabtai Tzvi, but Jacob Frank. But it's,
the Ukrainian author, the Ukrainian Nobel laureate.
Well, she's Polish.
Polish.
But still, it does occur to me that there's some kind of relationship between your project and hers, and I was wondering if you had something to say about that. Like, why is this you know, is this something that, you know, why is this so fascinating? You know, really you come from, she's writing from the more from the far west of Poland, right? And you're kind of from the far east, but still. It's,
yes.
And I just wanted to tell you also that my grandma was from, I told you she was from Galicia, and she told me she did understand Ukrainian. She had a Ukrainian nanny. So she was not unaware of Ukrainians. But another question, besides that, maybe this is too much, but I had another, you know, more about the modern thing. When the war broke out in Ukraine, so many people, you know, you don't hear it so much now, but people here, Jewish people, were rather confused because the relationship between Jews and Ukrainians, as you kind of mentioned, you know, kind of hinted, was not so straightforward, and many people had.
So I think we have like 4 or 5 questions here. So you can answer any or all briefly.
It came up for me, and I was wondering if somehow you were dealing with that also. This kind of complicated history of Jews and Ukrainians.
Okay, first of all, about Olga Tokarczuk novel, the Jacob's books. Right, the title.
Book of Jacob. Yeah.
Book of Jacob. Yeah. In my novel, Sabbatai Tzvi lives in the book only short time, and it's another story about that Galicia. The one Ukrainian critics compare Tokarczuk books and my novels. And said that completely different books. But you know, if you have history and you have one of two historical person and the same, some kind, approximately the same period you, Olga and I described, we don't reject any person, and that person historical the same period in the mostly appeared in our texts. But I describe history of Ukrainian Galicia. And of course, I need some background of Jewish life, of Armenian life, of Austrian and Polish life. That's second your question about Ukrainians, Jewish-Ukrainians relationship. Of course, it's a long story. Of course, we have black and white pages of our relationship. Of course, Ukrainians and Jewish has another religion, right? Judaism and Christianity. But in contemporary Ukraine and contemporary for my generation, we deeply understand to describe our history and our relationship with whole questions, with good time and a bad time. And for Ukrainians, right now, we understand that we have any sins before Jews. Any sins, гріхи. Як це буде гріхи?
Sins.
Sins, any sins. And we wanted to provide dialogues between our nations. Dialogues with our history, our land, our literature, and that perspective in the future. Because I believe that only cultural only cultural make for us that place where we speaking about all questions and answering on all questions.
Thank you so much. We have
copies of compliments of the UJE. We have copies of the book in Hebrew or English.
Ukrainian.
And we also, for sale, there are copies of Paper Bridge, which is Vasyl's most recent collection of poetry, translated from Ukrainian to English. People are interested in purchasing this, and we look forward to the arrival of the novels in English. And we thank you for your voice and your work, and we pause once again to remember the situation in Ukraine, and we're all hoping for a quick, speedy, peaceful, just resolution to that conflict.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, audience, for coming. And I feel honored to be here and in this place. Thank you very much.
Can I ask another little question?